Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Friday. Hope you're all doing well. It's good to see everyone here. Love seeing all the faces rolling in, more names coming in. Absolutely wonderful. Hope you're all doing well. If whether you're celebrating the Easter holiday coming up, look forward to. Hope you have a good time off with your family. If you're watching college basketball this week, I know Illinois, a lot of the Wisconsin or the Midwest crowd is pretty happy about that. Purdue playing tonight, but some good games coming up. So hope you're all enjoying that. But we're really excited today to be having a conversation with Chief Bob Horton and Chief Jeff Buchanan, which we'll get going on here in a second. But just great to see everyone rolling in. Sonny Kirkley, hello. Brad Harvey, welcome. Jim Kiken from IFSI, great to see you. Michael Friedman, welcome. If you so please and you can, I welcome you to fire up the chat. Where are you from? Where are you calling from today? Are you USA based? Are you Chicago? Are you in California? Love to hear where you're from, your organization. Chat is very much welcome and open. So I'm going to start off myself, Kevin Sofin, Chicago. So good to see everyone. And we had about a little over 100 people say yes to this. I'm not 100% sure if 100 people are going to show up. But I think if we get, in the 40 to 60 range, it'd be pretty exciting. Again, Aaron Opliger, my recent Smart Firefighting podcast guest, victim, whatever you want to call it. Good to see you, Aaron. Denise, welcome. Love it. Yeah, Jim, congrats on your win. So, all right, it's 102. So, no rest for the weary. Sometimes we just gotta run into this. I am actually going to do one other thing here just before we get going. I have meeting a fellow colleague co-host. So, all right, well, it's 102. We're gonna have more people rolling in, but it's great to see we got 36 people in attendance so far. And it's just wonderful to see everyone here. Emily, if you could help let other people in while we do the intro here, that'd be great. But hello, everyone. Good day, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here today in this roundtable. If we think technology is so great, why don't we use it? As we gather here today in this wonderful Zoom room, our goal is not to question, but to understand the intricate dance between innovation and tradition within the fire service, and to really uncover these layers of resistance to change. We're here to discuss this intersection of past methods, best practices, and future possibilities, really with the goal to spark a dialogue that can and will lead to real changes. And as some of you know, I love to bring people together, especially people who have a great track record and experience in educating the fire service. Today, we're humbled and grateful to be joined with retired Fire Chief of Las Vegas, Jeff Buchanan, and Deputy Director of the Western Fire Chiefs Association, Bob Horton. I'm going to have both Bob and Jeff give a quick introduction here, but just to remind everyone of the format, both Jeff and Bob are going to speak for about 7 to 10 minutes each. And then it's kind of a feeding frenzy, organized pandemonium amongst everyone. It's required that you're respectful to one another and also encourage that you participate. This is meant to be a selfish event for you to ask questions, connect with people in the back channel to learn and really, really participate. So consider raising your virtual hand, jump in. I want everyone the chance to speak, but please, I ask you to not speak for longer than 60 to 90 seconds at any given point. The value here is really to be able to have this back and forth, connecting the back channels. So engaging on LinkedIn. So the other thing is Western Fire Chiefs has the Fire Alliance Headlines podcast. So we're going to put that link in there. A lot of really good work. Good job, Samantha, Gideon, and Bob and your team. So without further ado, again, cameras are welcome to be on and microphones come off later. Jeff, if you could lead us off and give us a quick little intro, followed by Bob, and then we'll jump into the main show.
Yeah, great. Kevin, good to see you. Glad to be here. BOB, it's always good to be with you on the same show. Great to see so many familiar faces. When Kevin and I were kind of spitballing this show, well, let me back up a little bit about me. Retired fire chief from Las Vegas Fire. Cut my teeth in North Las Vegas. Was there for 13 years. Was really fortunate to get some really cool positions. At the end, after fire chief, they threw me the keys to the store. I was interim city manager for a hot minute, worked at Clark County, and then ended my career at Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. And I'm a big fan of education. I'm a professor of practice at UNLV, and just love this discussion about innovation and some of the barriers. So I'll be looking forward to hopping into this.
Right on. And Bob?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. Bob Horton, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you, Kevin, very much for having me. I reside in Medford, Oregon. That's Southern Oregon, just near the California border. Prior to the job that I have now with the Western Fire Chiefs, I served as fire chief of Jackson County Fire District 3, a small rural fire district of about 70 employees at 4 career stations, 4 volunteer stations. And I'll talk a little bit about my philosophy as we unpack this conversation around technology a little bit later. Prior to coming to Oregon, I grew up in the fire service in Las Vegas, Nevada, actually a different department than Jeff did, but we met in paramedic school in the early 2000s and have been buddies riffing on these topics ever since. This and many others. So it's always a pleasure to join him on screen and be able to have this conversation and maybe even a little debate on areas that we differ as it comes to these topics. So grew up in Las Vegas Fire, did some integration of technology in the 911 center and EMS systems that we had out there in risk reduction, which I'll talk about. I left assistant chief in Vegas in 17 to move to Oregon for that job. Today, I want to share perspective of what it's like to be a fire chief, trying to address some of these issues and maybe share a little bit of what my leadership philosophy is and where I had areas where it went right and where I had areas where it went wrong, in hopes that others will have better ideas as we move into the future, this idea about technology integration. So thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Bob. And so now, again, reminder of how this works. Jeff is going to present for the first kind of 5-8 minutes, followed by Bob. I'm going to spotlight them at that time. This is the only time we're going to have a spotlight. And then again, it's organized pandemonium. So in this point, get your popcorn ready, listen a little bit, but get your questions going and really, again, connecting with people in the back channel. So without further ado, Jeff, the floor is yours. I'm going to spotlight you for everyone.
Excellent, excellent. So when Kevin and I started first talking about this conversation, I think that it's what is right in front of all of our faces is why we use data and technology and how valuable it is. And we're just kind of having some dialogue back and forth. And it's really, we're just wanting to kind of hit the other perspective of this. And well, okay, if data and technology is so great, why aren't we using it? Because there's a whole litany of examples that exist. And let me just start right off, kind of controversial. And let's talk about red fire trucks for a second, which many of us have worked for organizations. Las Vegas Fire and Rescue is red, a really cool red, I might add, a really cool red that we use. Red, it's iconic, truly, in the fire service. But when you dig a little bit, you know that, or you realize that this is not a new kind of challenge. It's one that's been around for a while. That's been backed by science, starting decades ago in like 1984, and that is that the best actual color, according to data, according to results, isn't red. Actually, it's lime green or it's yellow. As a matter of fact, you'll find out that red and or black, but let's start with red, is one of the worst colors you can have at night. People are colorblind through the color of red. Put a black stripe on it. It makes it even more difficult to see. Fast forward to more research and more results. FEMA did a report in roughly 2009 that corroborated 1984 results of multiple studies. And again, re-emphasize the colors of lime green and yellow. And so when you look at just that narrow data field, and when you start to ask some of the experts, why does this persist? They become befuddled. They don't know. They can't answer the question, and they come up with many times something just called tradition, which I know we're going to unpack when we're coming through here. But there's a whole kind of litany of similar type of topics. We could talk about seatbelts, which is still a struggle. Lots of data out there to be to be secured when you're responding code 3 or code 1 for that matter. We could talk about fire helmets. That one gets really lively. That's a lively discussion, right? But let me share a couple of examples in my own my own world and my own experiences, and maybe a couple of nuggets that I think helped along the way. And I think feeds right into this whole technology. Many of us on this call started or only had anybody remember the whole pressure relief valve in fire engines, and that was the only way to go. Well, the technology has been around quite some time, where you push a button, it's a pressure governor. Well, I was familiar with an organization to keep the names of those innocent that we were they were they were only ordering pressure relief valve fire engines, and I'm like, well, why? Pressure governors have been around for a decade, 15 years. I don't remember exactly when the technology took place. And the response wasn't based on any really level of data, but it was about an impression, a way people felt. And at that particular organization, the engineers just felt like they weren't doing enough if they weren't setting the relief valve. Well, part of the way that we made that movement, and I'll get into this a little bit more, is we really tried to focus on how it can benefit the operator. I think that's a big piece to the puzzle. Here's the deal at the end of the day, and we'll probably hit on this a little bit more throughout the conversation, is you have to make, when you're embracing technology and embracing data, at least from my perception, you have to make the individuals that are going to use, the end users, use that technology, see where it benefits them. And maybe even more important than the benefit is how they're still entirely important to the job at hand, and how they're not going to lose any of that importance. And that actually transcended into another example, at least from my experience, and that's with this whole clean cab concept. Everybody on this call knows all too well. Certainly, we're not going to, or maybe we will, get into the behavioral, psychological, and emotional health of firefighters. But then there's the well-researched physical dangers to firefighters from all the exposures, all the noxious chemicals, and unfortunately, all the cancers that firefighters endure. And the whole notion of clean cab concept, I'm not talking anything new to anybody on this particular Zoom, is that if you can just limit some of the exposures, you're going to be in a better place. And that's exactly what the clean cab concept, and for those of you that don't know, it is about removing as much as you can that interfaces with an ideal age atmosphere from the interior of the cab, which is call it like an oven, call it whatever you want, but it becomes a breeding ground for more and more and more exposures. And that's a huge paradigm shift. And one of the agencies that I was working with, we knew it was going to be a monumental lift. And some of our approaches that we took to it, hoping to ensure, that's probably a bad word, to have an opportunity for success, was to have first of all, you had to clearly outline the benefits for the end users. We'll get into the importance in a couple of minutes. We had to really share the vision. Where are we going? Why are we doing these things? We had to get the right influencers involved, and we did that. And there were some with titles, and then there were some that didn't have titles, that were really, really, they could move the needle. When they spoke, people listened. And to really have them a part of this, and moving the whole concept forward. Um, and that was really the biggest pieces to the puzzle. And then on the back end, we had to make sure that the firefighters knew you're still going to be super important. You are still going to be effective when you get to those residences, offices, wherever those fires were. But we really had to make sure that we were talking through it. We had a lot of, if you want to call it, work groups, task forces. I think many people on this call like to stay away from the word committee, but we had a lot of functional groups that were working together. And then finally, how I would describe it, and for many of us on this call, when we were going through our recruit academies, at least it resonates for me. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so when you're going through a huge change, in order to combat some of the strong headwinds that could be in the form of potentially tradition or other barriers we'll discuss, sometimes just accepting that incremental progress, that couple of steps forward, putting your head down, maybe that is going to be acceptable. And so what did that mean in the agency I was talking about? There wasn't a sweeping change. It was going to all be stepped in over time, and just accepting that progress was there. And so I gave a little bit of examples. I'm probably up on that 6-7 minute time limit, but just having an approach, a strategic approach to some of these. I don't have all the answers. That's for darn sure. But there is a lot of data that is out there right now, a lot of technological advances that are available for people to use, and we're not using them. And we just got to continue to have the dialogue and trial and error and try to figure out reasons to get people to maybe have a little bit higher utilization understanding.
Jeff, good stuff. I wrote that down. Among other things, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So we're going to go next to Bob here. And again, everyone, continue to fire up the chat, thoughts, questions. After Bob is done, it's going to be an open Q&A, and we're going to do a roundtable here. So now we got Bob at the helm. Bob, floor is yours.
All right, Kevin. Thanks, Jeff. Nice framework to get us started. Before I really get into some of the how I got to what I was trying to do, as both as an assistant chief and a fire chief, let me level set just a couple of things right away. I was trained in public administration by political scientists, and I was trained in public policy by economists, and that shapes my worldview. And so I think some of that's going to come out as you start to understand how I'm thinking about these challenges or these problems. A couple other philosophical underpinnings that shapes my thinking. One is that I believe the fundamental role of the fire chief is to optimize the decision environment in the organization and to communicate the key decisions that are made. And what I mean by that is, how are decisions made within your organization? Who is at the table? Who has a chance to influence those? Is the environment right for growth and change? Or is it sometimes decisions, the boss just has to make a decision and dictate that down. Is that communicated ahead of time? Do you reserve the right to ultimately make that decision, or are you building consensus amongst your executive teams? So a fire chief's role is to optimize that decision environment for the organization and to ensure an efficient communication strategy across your organization. Number two, the fundamental role of the fire service within the community is to manage risk, to lower risk. So if we espouse to be a public safety entity, agency, to me, that's at an opposite end of this notion of risk. So if we're going to increase safety in the community, to do that, we have to decrease risk. And to decrease risk, we have to understand risk, and we have to manage it appropriately. So the chief's job is to optimize decisions. The fire service's job within the system is to optimize, or is to lower and manage risk in that community. And to understand that is where we're going to start talking, where I believe we need advancements in integration, better integration of technology and analytics, data analytics, to inform those decisions. So there's a couple of things that just shapes my philosophy. 2017, I got in front of the board of directors of this small rural fire district in Oregon, and they asked me, Bob, what are three biggest challenges to the fire service? Three biggest challenges to the fire service. And boy, did I get it up there at the high level, at least how I'm looking at our entire industry. Let me also say my experience is in Nevada and Oregon. So I'm going to speak from my experience in those two agencies and from listening to fire chiefs predominantly in the West. Some of you are in other regions of the United States or across internationally and may have a different experience. We'd like to hear that. And when we get into the discussion pieces, what's different in your experience as well? I'm going to share mine. So I was asked by this board of directors, three of the biggest challenges, led in with a failure to recognize that we may, and I suggest we most likely are, although we may not know for a number of years, experiencing a significant paradigm shift in the fire service, much like the integration of EMS was. And that is that we have become a social safety net for the entire system in a community. So how are we, rather than fighting this as a fire service, how are we embracing it? And how are we identifying what our role within the community is? thinking about it through that context of risk. So paradigm shift in the fire service, it's happening right now. We could probably do a whole nother show, Kevin, on debating whether or not we were good as a fire service of embracing EMS or not. Won't get into that today. Number two, changing generations in the workforce. And how are we creating an environment for success for different values? I've since sort of changed some of my thinking on this through further conversations, that it's really less about a generational change and more about a societal change. And that has been really expedited post-pandemic and expectations on employers. But what are we doing as a fire service to adapt to either generational philosophies or values within society to make sure that those who work for us are successful? That's number two. And the third challenge is, how are we integrating technology into our operations? And that's what we're going to focus predominantly on for this conversation today. So I went into the organization, and as I like to do when you do any strategic planning, is to really do this, sort of an extensive visioning exercise. And we'll kind of go through that right now. The firefighters we hire today, specifically like the frontline operations folks, depending on what your pension system looks like, let's call it a 25 to 30-year pension. It's 2024 now, are going to be looking to retire in the year 2050. The year 2050. Okay. So now let's imagine a fire service in the year 2050. And what does it look like? And it doesn't seem, when I have these conversations broadly, that we have trouble visualizing how we're going to be training, in this context of technology. That AI is going to be a significant player in the game of the fire service. That we're going to be using drones at a level we barely even have imagined. And the technology in 2050 that we don't even know it exists is going to be into this system. Now, let me back us up to the year 2040. What does it look like in 2040? And we start to envision that. Or 2030. And the point that I'm starting to get at is, what steps are we taking as an organization? I'm sort of speaking to you as I'm telling this story to my organization. What steps are we taking to be prepared for what is to come, to embrace what is here today, to get comfortable with the options we have today, and then to be prepared for what it is that's going to come? Because that's the job of navigating our strategic plan forward in our organization, to start to move us towards this envisioned future. Now, not to get too into the details, we envision the future two ways. One was, what does a successful organization look like, and what does a failed organization look like? But I can share with you, summarizing it, it was quite clear. By not doing the things that we suggest in terms of embracing technology and utilization of data, we're headed on a path towards failure. What does failure look like? Maybe a different conversation. So, how do we start to move in the right direction? And for me, like most chiefs that are on the call, like, you start to push on the doors of your organization to figure out which one's willing to swing open. I didn't try to do a wholesale change. I tried to navigate change with surgical precision, because I knew if we met resistance in certain areas, it could cause a lot of trouble, a lot of distrust. So we started to push in different directions. My predominant focus as the fire chief for the 5.5 years that I was there was to optimize the command level decision environment. I talked about my earlier philosophy. There's a distinct difference in decision-making when you're an administrator and you have time to gather and process and analyze, to when you're an incident command officer, when you have suboptimal information, you have cognitive fatigue from, or overload, cognitive overload and fatigue, depending on how busy you've been that day. So you have less than optimal information that's happening in the command environment. So that gets to, I still hear today in 2024, like, just start sending more. We'll just send more units. We'll just deplete the supply of the system, and then I'll figure it out when I get there. And that to me was just an absolute head scratcher. I remember scrolling social media one day, and here's this fire raging out the front of the alpha side of a 2-story house in Ashland, which is about 30-45 minutes south of where I live. And I'm like, here are citizens, immediate responders, these intel collectors on scene, sharing this in real time to social media, and nobody's seeing that. Like, nobody's able to that picture alone that's active, that video is so informative to how you might strategically prepare for that environment. So I set on a path. and partnerships of folks, some folks that are on this call to help inform that environment better. How do we get better information processed and analyzed in a way that it becomes useful for those decision makers on the ground in real time? And how do we get better video? How do we get so on and so forth? And we don't have to get into details. I used to lead with a philosophy, Kevin, that more information is better. That's that economist training that I had. More information, always better. And I got resistance from that. And I think I caught a little bit in Jonathan's comments that that is why that's not necessarily true. So in conversations like this, I've changed my thinking that more information isn't always better. Is it good information? Right. And that's what a debate right there in the data conversation alone is trying to suss out between good and bad information. And I land on what also Jonathan made in a comment that I extract from that is, okay, we need good, debate on what that means, and make it useful. Is information useful? And so how do we get better, useful information in front of our decision makers in the command environment is where I spend a lot of my time working in the organization. And as we get into more conversation, I can share details about what we did. Unless you want to hear it now.
Yeah. Well, Bob, that was fantastic. Bob and Jeff, great way to set the stage here. 26 minutes in, so we've got at least 34 minutes left. And the point of that is really to kind of set the stage for this conversation here. And actually, I saw Gary Breeze just joined. I totally copied this format from what the Colorado State Fire Chiefs were doing with having this kitchen table talk. This is really the value. Here's Gary rejoining. This is the value in being able to have this roundtable conversations. But again, I ask you to not necessarily drain on for longer than 90 seconds. But I see a few people have had stuff in the chats, and I can obviously facilitate some of this. I will. But some of you have your cameras on, so I'm actually going to start off with voluntolding someone who already had a comment. AJ, you probably shouldn't be surprised I'm voluntolding on you, but you had a comment in there too when Bob was talking. But I'd love to hear your some of your initial thoughts on that, as well as kind of let us know what you meant by your comment. And introduce yourself really quickly too.
Hey, I'm a fire captain in Southern California. I work for Kona Fire Department. Going on 32 years now. I worked 5 years for Forest Service as a hot shot. I've worked for Cal Fire. I've been local government paramedic. I like technology. And I look at my career. I started in 93. No cell phones. There was one radio on the fire engine, and I've kind of watched this progression. I worked as an incident leader on an incident management team, so kind of seeing the technology at the highest level of command, trying to improve, information, get it to be intelligence for operations to make better decisions. And so I've been kind of a spearhead in our department to push technology and to get it in the hands of both at the command level, strategic level, operations level, in front of captains, even at the crew level. And it's hard. And I feel on the technology side, for some reason, we have this gap, and Kim's in here too. We've had long discussions, like, why is it with technology that we don't feel like we need to put the same reps in to understand and learn like we do with pulling a hose and throwing a ladder? Because every time we did all those things, those skills, and we had to do them many times to get good at them, and you've probably all heard this before, but an amateur does it till they get it right, and a professional does it till they can't get it wrong. And for some reason, I feel on the technology front, I feel that people don't. I start when I teach technology type applications, my first slide is be brave enough to suck at something new. You're not going to be great at this when this starts. But I feel like with technology, many of the times the apps they're using, they're trying to draw, parallels between scrolling through TikTok or YouTube videos, like, oh, I know how to use a phone or technology, to like these other applications that you're going to have to learn how to use some of these tools. I have a background in GIS. The first time I opened up ArcGIS Pro or ArcMac back in the day, I had a heart attack. Look at all these tools. How will I ever learn to use these tools to do all this stuff? And guess what? Through education and training, just like the first time I threw a ladder, I could barely get that 24 up without falling down. And I did it 100 million times and I was good at it. So I'll get off my soapbox here, but I don't know why that is. And I would love to understand that, why we're willing to put so much time into these other things to get good at them, to throw it, putting a breathing apparatus on. Why, when it comes to technology, we're not willing to put the same sort of effort in.
Bob and Jeff, I'd love to have you kind of give initial responses to that. And then again, we want this to be interactive in two ways possible. So we'll throw it back to the audience, but Bob and Jeff first.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. Well, first, full disclosure, I'm no psychologist and this is purely a wag, right? But I agree with you. I agree with you, AJ, and I will share what my philosophy is, and I think that's fear. I think it's fear. Fear, and that kind of trickles down into a couple different areas that are related. And one is obsolescence, and one is loss of identity. And I think that that's a scary thing. And I'm a big fan of emotional intelligence. And you find out that we use our emotions in almost every single decision we make. It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And it's no different in the fire service. So most of us got into this industry wanting to come up with your cliche, slay the beast, fight the dragon, and do all these really, really cool things, right? And I have to admit, that was part of my inspiration as well. But you slowly realize not only is that the least amount that most of us do, it could arguably be the least significant as far as impact to the community and the changes that we're making. And so when you bring up why aren't we spending, and first of all, let me just say spot on, sets and reps. We learn it from day one. Why aren't we giving people the not just the tools they need, the training that they need to use these tools and make it important to them? And and that's what I would say. I would say that there's a fear that, okay, and all of a sudden the fire service becomes technologically advanced. Could we lose some of our identity? Is that possible? I don't know. I would argue no. I would argue no. I would argue we don't have to lose our identity to embrace technology, to embrace innovation. But I would also be dumb not to acknowledge that there's other perspectives that some people might be like, well, gosh, if we're using this technology, if we're not doing this more traditional method of whatever X, Y, and Z may be, well, will I be needed? Will I lose my identity? Will people not view me as the same firefighter today as I was yesterday? So that's my wag at that, AJ. I think it's about fear. I think it's about loss of identity. And I think it's about thinking that we're no longer relevant.
It's funny because I always, tell people, put yourself in the customer's shoes, right? Like, all right, you're now on the customer end of this, right? You've dialed 911, and I'm always enamored by, like, what do you think the public thinks we're capable of doing? And not all, like, do they expect us to be using this stuff? And if the expectation, like where I live, I hope my local fire department is doing these things that I hope they are using on the high side strategic level, looking at the data so they are better prepared to respond to surges in response. That we have mutual aid. I mean, I live near, and I'm right between two bordering agencies, and I've been pushing for CAD to CAD in our county for 12 years now, and we're just about there. It's not a technology problem a lot of the time. It is a human problem. The fact that we don't use a lot of this technology has nothing to do with the availability of it. It is the will to do it. And I said, boys, if we ever have an incident at my house and I feel like there's a delay and I find out that we aren't doing these, I don't care if it's not even picking up a phone call to get another, a closer unit going. That's a problem. Those sort of, the will to do the right thing, to use technology. Again, I'm a fire captain, so I'm at that, I'm meeting the customer every day. But I know what it takes to get this stuff, and that is at the higher level support, inspiration to do these things. being okay with, we have a drone program now. We're putting drones on every one of our fire engines. And I talk to folks, we're not forcing guys to be drone pilots. Why wouldn't you want to be a drone pilot? I'm afraid to crash it. I said, I don't care if you crash that drone during training, learning, that's okay. Like you're gonna have to be okay with some risk and learning to do these new things. And that's the technology thing. So anyway, I'll leave it.
Throw it to Bob.
Yeah.
This is a great discussion. What I want to add to it, I agree with everything that's been said here, and organizational culture is a huge piece. AJ mentioned something that just jogged my memory about this notion of expectations. As a fire service leader, I start to think about what is a reasonable expectation for integration of technology. Because listen, I'm all in. I think hopefully you got that from my discussion. I'm ready to go today. We have the money, we're making the investment, like let's do this. Let's start, let's get on it. And the pace of change is something you have to decide within your own organization, and what is a reasonable expectation for moving people forward. What I didn't say when I was talking about that year 2050, 2040, 2030 thing is taking the first steps towards that new direction is the hard part. Because even the curmudgeons in my organization would agree these advancements are coming and that they're valuable when you put the target 30 years in the future. But for some reason, taking 5 steps today is really hard. And there's a lot of behavioral science behind why that may be the case. But I want to offer two things for leaders in the room who have an opportunity to influence this. Number one, something about integration of technology is more likely not in your position description. I didn't say that well. I probably will not find a statement to technology integration in your organization in any of your position descriptions. It's probably time to take a look at that. Position descriptions, in my experience, haven't changed in decades, but the environment for firefighters should. That should be the catalyst in that analysis of this position of what we need to be successful in the years forward. We should be analyzing that, changing that, and recruiting to the firefighter that's going to be successful in the future. So look at how we're marketing for positions, and are we starting to drive people who are interested in risk reduction, philosophy, and integration of technology? Those were the kinds of firefighters I was sifting out. Now, I've been giving this spiel for a while before we started to run into some really hard labor market issues. Still feel strongly about what it is we're looking for. We do have to get more creative to inject supply into this labor market for our position. But maybe this is the time. Like, I'm told that these folks are out there who want to be part of this kind of service level with technology. So couple of nuggets for me. Position descriptions. Oh, the other one is recruit training. Firefighters in Oregon will come out, firefighter one will not have ever been exposed to a drone at all. And that a basic drone in any element of intelligence gathering or utilization, payload or whatever. So we have to get it ingrained in our education and our training environment at the ground level and start bringing in new folks. One of my failures as a fire chief, Kevin, is when I put together committees to test things, and thank you for vendors in the room who have come to small departments like mine to do alpha and beta testing for your products, because we had folks who were really engaged. I get we're not the big sexy department with the big city name, but look at small departments to help inform what it is that you're doing. But my failure is I always built teams that were full of the high performers, high achievers, and everything came back with all 5-star thumbs up, like we should be doing this kind of thing. And when I went to integrate it, I had trouble with the mid pack and the low achievers in the organization. So look at that diversity of those who are evaluating whether you should or shouldn't. You'll find more buy-in. When I started to do that, you started to find more buy-in, and you were able to get a little bit more movement in what Jeff and I kind of call that marginal middle in terms of towards the direction, technology integration. Thank you, Kevin.
I love all this. And like I said, we only have 20-ish minutes left. We'll maybe go later. And frankly, Jonathan, you've had your hand raised, and Michael, and I'm looking at some other great names in here, and Jim and Paul and Kim and Dean and Mick, Sonny, David, Declan, all you guys. I want you all to speak. So I want to try and, not that wasn't amazing, just maybe a little bit kind of more consolidated conversations here, just like, and so Jonathan, you asked all these amazing questions that could be 12 future roundtables. So Jonathan, give you a quick, give us kind of drop your 2 cents, and love to hear what you're thinking.
Yeah, this will be very, very fast. Thank you guys for having this, putting this together, and for I figured rather than take up time on this, I'd write the questions down, and I would love to engage on that with folks. But I do happen to have a psychology background. among other things. And I think one point I wanted to throw out there is, Bob, maybe for your consideration for the group here, is where I think some of the apprehension and fear comes from. At the end of the day, we're mice, right? I've been saying this a lot more bluntly of late, right? When you think about the most basic psychology experiments called operant psychology, for anyone who wants to geek out on it, right? If you shock the mice every time they touch the button or go for the food, they don't touch the button anymore after a while. They don't go for the food, right? We learn similarly, right? It's not a really complex thing. And what I found really curious, I'd love to throw this out to your group to talk about, but much of my world is in patient records, patient documentation, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of um, conflation, right? There's a lot of association of if you didn't document it, you didn't do it, right? Or you could get called into court, you could get written up, or maybe you'll lose your job, you lose your license, you get suspended, you can't feed your family. Oh my God, what am I going to do? That stress builds. Right. And so what happens is you end up with this latent aversion to doing the thing, because even though it may seem like it may be more efficient, it may be better in the long run, but you've been conditioned to associate this with pain, right? And potential suffering and losing of your ability to do all the things you need to do in life, as opposed to recasting that as a positive. And it sounds kind of hokey when you say it like that, but it's actually the way our brains work, right? If you talk about, for example, I've seen fire services and firefighters change the look in their eyes when they were always told, if you don't do this thing, you could get sued, we won't make any money, you could shut down your ambulance service, all the things, right? As opposed to, aren't you good at your job? Right? You did a good job, and you want somebody to be able to know how good a job you did. So if you write down the details of what you did, then someone else is going to be able to look at that and give you the credit for it. You get the reward, you get the benefit, you get the raise, you get the promotion. And and that little shift goes from scary to, hey, let me do more good. Right. And it starts to align with a sense of advancement as opposed to a sense of punishment. And it's super simple. But I have been in the room where folks have been struggling using the language of mandates to get their crews to do things, but they never use the language of reward, even in an internal reward. And I think that's such a simple thing to do when you're leading troops. That anyway, I would suggest that's one of the places where, when you think about these much more complex things that you learn how to do on a daily work, right? Why does technology seem so scary and complicated? Is because it's associated with that. We can disassociate that just by recasting the way we describe what it is you're being asked to do. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Bob and Jeff, and even others, if you want to add on to that. I want to keep it rapid here, but quick thoughts, Bob or Jeff, from what Jonathan just added before we throw it to Michael, and then I'm looking at some other people, Dean and Kim and Sunny, to go after that.
That was good insight. And my brief read on one of the challenges that why we're not seeing more, because I see a big opportunity in terms of leadership training and what you described. And what I see constrained in the leaders and supervisors within our organization is we train for tactical abilities and not for leadership, soft skills. And until we're able to navigate around training and assessing and promoting people who believes in the concepts that you had made, we're going to continue to have this run up against this challenge. We have leaders and officers and organizations who just simply don't think that way. How do we change the needle on that? So thank you for your comment.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in, Kevin, as you move the ball around, we got to have what's called psychological safety. We have to have people that can make mistakes. And I agree, if we're talking and saying people can make mistakes, we have to back it up, and it's got to be backed up all the way through the top. And that, so that's really, really important. So we have to do more than preach people can make mistakes. We have to have that backed up by action, and really have that learning environment where people can make they can have some errors, because they're going to happen.
Love it. Thanks, Jeff. All right, Michael, floor is yours. You got a question, ask it, comment, drop it. It's all yours.
Yeah, just to build on the other conversation. So I've been in innovation and technology for fire service and life safety for the last 10 years. And before that, I was in consumer products good doing innovation consulting. And one of the biggest challenges across any innovation is behavior change. we can have a great technology, but if nobody changes what they do, it doesn't work to deliver why we invested all the money to do that. And, Bob, just you're probably familiar with this, but a simple thing is what's in it for me? So ask that question, and as part of the training is sitting down with the individuals and explain, hey, here's this technology, but it's not about the technology. Here's how it's going to benefit you as an individual, as part of fire service, as part of the community. And it's just a very simple thing to think about as we're looking at the training program to go beyond the technology, but what's in it for me as the individual that I need to change my behavior to adopt it.
Well said. And I'm looking, Chief Z, Ron, you want to build on that and thoughts on what are your thoughts?
I actually think, some of some of the folks we have just don't understand technology or they're afraid of it. And I think Bob Horton already made a great point about updating our job descriptions, our PDs. It can't be more, the way we did things, we're just not keeping up with it. And some of that's because a lot of people just don't understand the whole HR side of the house and what we need to get done. So I think, that part of it is about as right on target again. But again, we've got to communicate with an organization. Those departments that are leading and you don't have your volunteers or your union there at the table when you're making some of these changes and updates, shame on you, because again, you've got to get them to accept it. And if they don't, well, you're going to be spending a lot of time and stalling the organization out.
Bob or Jeff, anything to add to that before I pass it off? I'm looking at you, Dean and Sonny and Paul, and Nick for next, and Jim.
I was gonna, Jeff, I didn't know if you had something. I was gonna shift gears to Brent's comment for a second, Kevin, if you didn't mind, but Jeff, go ahead.
Please.
You good? Okay.
I was just going to say relentless inclusivity. So to KZ's point, yeah, you absolutely have to include the union, or you're going to put a lot more effort in on the back end, keep them in on the front end. You want to bring as many people as you can possibly, but there is a breakover point to the detriment of progress, right? So, but I 100% agree. You got to be inclusive and include the union.
I think we all agree that the culture is a pretty narrowing bottleneck on some of these elements, if not most of them in technology. But Brent in the comments pointed out something that I think is also a big friction point. And this is like quite literally, even if your culture is ready and you're ready to embrace technology, your systems within your municipal procurement department and even some cultural thinking about how we make capital investments. And sometimes, most times your technology purchases are looked at capital is not keeping up with the modern time. So these technological advancements or software advancements are moving quicker than your procurement process can. I remember when I was working, it was different in my district because we were a fire district. We had a lot more autonomy. But when I was in the big city, in the metro environment, you want to procure new computers. 2.5 years from the time you started talking about the new computers and they were purchased before they actually hit a fire station environment. Because you go through this whole, you get it, the whole purchasing, then you go to IT, you get, cloned and get it secured. I'm not a tech person, but the tech people on here can say it smarter than I can. In 2.5 years, it hits someone's desk and it's old news. And we haven't seen a lot of policy change in organizations to do that. Now, I got a couple recommendations, a couple things that some of you probably can articulate better than I can. Number one, cooperative purchasing helps cut down on that time. Groups like Sourcewell have these technology solutions that have been already competitively bid and are available for purchase, like off of a menu. So cooperative purchasing for chief officers that haven't engaged in that, there's something worth considering. And number two, I have seen software as a service engaged or purchased as a consulting arrangement with your community. And that's a different way of purchasing. Like this software is utilization from like a consulting perspective. So it doesn't fall under a capital purchase. Someone who may have experience with that might be able to share a little bit more. That wasn't something I had to do when I was the fire chief, so I don't have any experience in navigating integration of, say, software solutions to the table. But these are things that are helping reduce that friction. Brent brings up a great point, is even if you want technology right now, you might not be able to get it right now because of procurement rules.
I want to keep it going around the horn. Dean, I had called on you earlier. I saw AJ, you got your hand up. I'll go Dean, AJ, then Sunny, and we'll go in that order, and then keep going around. Dean.
Yeah, thanks for hosting this discussion. I'm a retired cop, so I've worked with many of you in the field, and now I work for a company that's technology. So I'm really here to listen. And what I'm hearing loud and clear is that people are attracted to what they like to do, right? You're passionate about something, you find a career out of that. And what I think I'm hearing is that no matter who you are, what kind of technology you're offering, it really needs to look and feel like what you're used to. So, the generations that are upcoming, they see these kinds of technologies. If it looks and feels kind of like what they're used to on their phones or other things that they use regularly, I think that you'll see a quicker adoption of some of these things, because I think that we're here on these discussions because we're passionate about technology, right? We already have that built-in passion, but not everybody is like that. So I think that's what I'm hearing from you all. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Dean. All right, I'm looking at I called in you earlier, Sunny and Jim from IU and IFSI. I've seen Sunny, or you want to go first with kind of a quick intro, and then he kind of added on to this conversation.
Sure, and actually, Kevin, I as you were talking about, as Bob was talking about the procurement side, one of the things that struck me, because I do a lot of work with innovators, is the whole challenge from the innovator side of procurement processes, and the barriers, especially small businesses that don't have funds to sustain themselves, and they get caught in these long bureaucratic processes that they can't afford, and so they're not able to sustain their innovations or bring them to market. And so one of the concerns that I have is, like, how do you help break down those barriers? And it goes back to themes earlier, like people taking risk and psychological safety and being able to break things and feel like that's okay. And the innovators do that a lot, and they have that kind of mentality. So I think as a service, we want to get better at how do we bring and support those innovators into our process, realizing there's risk. I mean, it may not be something you've proven out 10 years of whatever, it's something that's new emerging. And that to me is a huge barrier to innovation, is finding those risk takers and those processes that can support folks before they go out of business, because they might have a perfectly wonderful, well-functioning kind of solution, but they can't survive that process of coming to this industry, and so you end up going to either a more lucrative industry or go out of business or whatever it happens to be. So to me, that's one of my concerns as someone who's comes out of innovation and startup world, but also in the university side, supporting those innovators, is thinking through, like, how do they get what they're doing out there to you all.
Thanks, Sunny. Jim?
Yeah.
So a couple of things. And it was kind of mentioned earlier in different ways, but change occurs through committed, passionate people, sort of. And what I mean by sort of is, you've got to have those people, you've got to have them willing to take risks, you've got to have them willing to make mistakes and look bad, but you have to have others to support them. You have to have a succession plan. How many departments have we seen that go down a path? You've got somebody that's all excited about this new technology. We're gonna do GIS, we're gonna do simulation, we're gonna do this, but then that person gets a different job in the department or moves out of the department and moves on, and then those ideas collect dust in a corner and never move forward, at least for a while, and then they may or may not re-engage in that project. The other thing is, technology is not cheap, and a majority of the departments across the country are small volunteer organizations, and they still adopt technology, but it's harder, and it's harder for career departments too, when all of your dollars have to go to sustaining the core mission and not necessarily expanding or finding efficiencies in the mission. So, it's a challenge, and there are always early adopters that are at the bleeding edge, people in the middle, and then late adopters or people that were going to drag their feet and fight and kick and scream before they get there. And we've seen it in the fire service over and over again, from radios in the vehicle to SCBAs to three-quarter boots to bunker pants and thermal imaging and all of that. It's all the same, and it just takes years or generational changes to an organization that brings about change.
Jim, well said. I love that. And we're getting closer to the end of time. We're probably to go after the hour. There's just so much here. And again, if you have to leave at the top of the hour, by all means. But continued organized pandemonium. There's a few people with their hands raised. Other people haven't all spoken yet. But AJ, Kim, Michael, I'm going to throw it to you guys. If you kind of keep it a little bit shorter, concise, but what you got?
Yeah, I got a comment on a couple folks. So Michael had made a comment about adoption of technology and giving them kind of the reason why. And if anything, it's interesting when self-preservation isn't enough. Like if I was to say this tool right here, this application on this phone could save your life or your one of our members that works here's life, this technology could make a huge difference. And it's still not enough to get you to do it. We have a technology platform called the Android Team Awareness Kit, and Kevin's interviewed me about it. And we had to push it to our captain's exam, to get just a little bit more buy-in. And it's interesting, even we can prove all the points to say, hey, the military uses this. It's proven to be effective there. This could be effective to save someone's life, maybe your own life, your brother's life, your sister's life, yet still we had to force even a little bit more. Let's put on the captain's exam. So it's just interesting. One other thing I want you guys, this is a great book I'm just about done with, called Predictably Irrational by Dan Arley. I saw Dan Muncie made a point about it in one of his posts on LinkedIn, and I started listening to it, and it was just like, I see the bias. Someone made a point about, well, the tools need to look like the tools they're using every day. And I will counter that a little bit because we made a push from iOS to Android for this tool. And believe me, if you don't think I fought, and I said, well, we didn't ask, what sort of SCBA do you use at home? What kind of fire engine do you use on your day off? What sort of trunk radio system do you use on your day off? We can't always cater to what you're so used to. You may have to get out of your comfort zone and learn a new tool. And the end of the day, the difference between iOS and Android are so small. At that point, you have a severe bias based on some sort of preference. So I'm there.
I would add, AJ, I think that was insightful, and as the economics in me would say that was good, successful utilization of incentives. You have this subset of people who want a promotion, and they are incentivized to do what they can to try to achieve that. And by injecting into an organization a shift in thinking is that. And I did that with community risk reduction. One of my favorite community risk reduction thought partners, Greg Rogers, is on the call right now. How did you get folks engaged? And it's a longer story, but I injected that into our officers exam. You want to be an officer? You're going to present risk reduction project. You're going to understand data analytics and so on and so forth. Anyway, I thought I didn't do it with technology. That would have been a creative addition for me too.
This is great.
Kevin, can I?
Kim, sorry, who wants to go? Jeff, you want to say something? And then Kim?
Yeah, I was just going to bounce off of AJ really quick too. And, when you talk about this whole notion of life saving, which I totally agree, I would argue that it's immediacy and the invisible nature of, again, cancer exposures. That's down the road that I may or may not get cancer. And I think, and you can't see it, right? You could see a gun in front of you pointed to your head. I have to make a decision, but you can't see some of these other things. And I think that creates a little bit of confusion when people are trying to balance out that risk benefit, but it's a great point, and I think it's great for dialogue.
Let me jump in a little bit, but one of the things I would tell you is that our generational gap and where your knowledge is with technology or not. The other thing that really affects our agencies, sometimes the smaller agencies, leave technology to somebody who is not necessarily really the CIO of the organization, but somebody may know something more than anybody else. The other thing that really stymies an organization is your CIO folks that don't want to go someplace or want to hold you back because it's more of a workload to them. Those are also the things that I think that you've got to watch, you've got to overcome, and some of those things you need to do. Last thing I'm going to do before we get too far down is I think our good friend Jeff here has got a new assignment he hasn't shared with us, and I think he's got a great new gig. And can you share that with us there, Buchanan?
Not yet. You're on mute, Jeff. But yeah, so I think if anything, Chief, I'm gonna use it as a continued transition of continued rapid fire. We're gonna keep going until we just wither off. Michael, keep it short, then I'll throw it to John, and then let's keep going around.
Shifting gears, quick question. Code guides everything we do. It's a lagging indicator, not a forward indicator. How can we not let the code of what used to work stymie new innovation?
You've stumped us. I have a thought, but I would throw it to Bob and to Jeff. But if anything, I see Jeff, John, you get your hand up, but Bob, you want to take a quick stab at that?
Ask that question again, because I was reading Gary's chat and I missed the question.
Yeah, so not so much on software, but we've got so many codes, it's hard to keep up on all of them. They can be a barrier to new innovation to solve a problem in a new way. But people sometimes stand behind the code. We're working with a mil spec, and for fire extinguishers, it specifies stainless steel. We have a new fire extinguisher that's a glass infused polymer that prevents rust and stuff, and for the Navy is great. Talking to them, they say, oh no, the code says this. So until you have a steel canister for your fire extinguisher, we can't use your new innovation. So how do we break through that in a way that's respectful of all the problems in the past, but also open to solving them in new and creative ways?
That I don't have an answer for that, but I understand the challenge, because the code process is so arduous and so slow that the pace of technology evolves faster than the codes and its ability to implement. To our earlier conversation about innovation, it stifles that into what you're describing, because you're not incentivized to invest in something that may take 10 years to get through. Kevin, you said you had a thought on that, and I don't know if Greg is still on the call. He's one of my resident code process experts that I would depend on. If he has a thought on it, Greg, I'd love to hear it too. But Kevin, what's your thought?
We usually, I mean, I guess I would actually defer this to turning it into the next roundtable. And again, it's something I would also defer, and that I actually don't quite know, except that usually when thinking of anything code related or community risk reduction related, particularly code, it's just a lot of the different end user conversations, and continue to have all these different insights to reverse engineer what actually makes sense. And one of the challenges is how fast technology is moving, and then what's actually happening today. So I think there's just that gap, and one thing Gary Breeze had talked about, this is a little different, but how do we shorten that time from idea to implementation? And I think looking at thermal imaging cameras is a great example in this context, where from looking at when ticks were first introduced to when they were starting to get adopted to when we had initial textbooks and when they were being trained on, and looking at that time frame took 20 years. How do we make that process 4 years? And obviously there's just bureaucracy and red tape and challenges with all that. So there's a lot of stakeholders involved with that. But I think that's something I'd love Greg Rogers to speak on, and others. But for the sake of just continue going around the horn, still got 35 of you here. We're gonna fire this off. John, I see you there, and I see other friends, Paul and Dave Coggeshell, Paul Spade, Coggeshell. I'd love to hear from you too, as well as see Mike and Mitch. So John, and then I'm looking at you, Paul and David, to kind of give some comments next. John, you're on mute. That's so 2020 of you.
There we go. Thank you.
All right. Good.
Yeah, this is kind of a little bit of a sales spiel, but I'm going to be in Las Vegas next weekend meeting with the MGM Grand regarding innovation. And the Bellagio has already started the process on our product, which is the first redesign of the fire extinguisher in 75 years. So going back to what Mike was saying, the hurdles that we had to overcome to get UL listing, NFPA approval was just mind-boggling. So I'll leave this, reach out to Jeff and ask if you have time. I'd like to swing by UNLV and show you this innovation that, the military's buying these now by the container loads. We have Verizon, Boeing, all these people are now buying a new product, but this is innovation. Like I said, we had the hurdles put in front of us by the legacy companies. And so we're finally breaking through and it's being accepted. Again, here we talk about innovation. So I'll just, ask Jeff if he's available.
You know what, John? I'm not sure. I'll put my email in the chat there and hit me up if I'm available. I'd love to help you out.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, I'm looking at some other fellow friends in the industry. Paul Spate, then David Coggeshell. Paul Spate, and then give us a little quick 2 seconds who you are, and then tell us your thoughts on what's going on here.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Spate. I'm kind of recently retired from Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service as a watch manager after 33 years service, and I now work as a tutor in emerging technology and digital transformation at the Fire Service College. And my main role there now is to integrate virtual reality into our training. It's great to hear all these people on the webinar. There's so much passion about kind of innovation and emerging technology. Just a couple of things I'm doing and the barriers I come across. I kind of try to integrate virtuality into our international and national firefighter development programs. I find my biggest barrier is the instructors. Some embrace change and some are resistant to change. And I've kind of, if I split them into 2 groups, the ones who embrace change tend to be the younger firefighters or kind of instructors who know the technology. They've used it as a kid, so it's nothing new to them. So they're not as scared of the technology. Some of the more experienced kind of tutors are a little bit afraid of the technology, possibly because they don't understand it. I believe they're a little bit wary that it may kind of take their job away from them. But I try to explain to them all that virtuality will never ever change. If I use breathing apparatus, for example, it will never take away the need for live fire training. What it does, it works as a blended approach. I could take their students for a day and I could put them through numerous scenarios. I can train them how to do branch and nozzle techniques, gas cooling, door entry procedures, situational awareness. So when they go on the incident ground to be exposed for real, they've already got a bit of competency already. Just before I joined the college, they put two groups through. One group had the traditional training and one group had training in VR. And the feedback from the instructors was a group that had the VR training prior to going into a live fire were more competent in dealing with the fire than the ones who hadn't. The ones who had the traditional training. And the big bit of feedback was from the group who kind of had the VR training was they didn't realize it was going to be that hot. And that's what I use when I talk to the instructors, is that why you got to understand they still need to be trained in heat and humidity. We can't do that in virtual reality, but we can get them to do a lot of the basics. We can pause in virtual reality. We can have a discussion. We can ask them what their thought process is. Then we can move on, and we can have that with every student. Whereas in real fire training, you haven't got the ability to pause it, ask them what the thought process is, because the fire's still developing. And that's one of the main things I'm doing at the moment. Other stuff I'm looking at is fire investigation, which is kind of now moving into police scenes of crime, and I'm also looking a little bit at kind of wearables and robotics. So that's kind of me in a quick nutshell.
Only 100 things going on, Paul, and you're coming to FDIC, right?
I'm not there, no, unfortunately.
Okay, well,
hopefully next year.
Soon enough. All right, well, Jim, I know you have a thing. You got a comment on this, please, Jim. It's you, and then I'm throwing it to you, Dave Coggeshall.
So thank you so much for saying that, Paul. Again, technology is a tool, and it can do some things really well, but it isn't the universal answer for every single problem. And we have this discussion at the Fire Institute. You know, there are some people that are afraid of some of the technology for simulation and training, and you have to reassure them it is not going to replace anything we already do. It's going to augment. It's going to support the learning process or any other process with technology. Excuse me, a thermal imaging camera doesn't help you find a victim if it fails. And you have to be able to search and find your way out without your thermal imaging camera, because they do fail. They're just a piece of technology. They're just a tool. So we have to do all of those other things. But these tools can make things easier. They can make things more efficient, and they can make things better, but they don't replace necessarily anything else.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Jim. Yeah, it's that blended approach, you know, that goes hand in hand. You need one, and it's the starting place is the virtual world, and then you end up in the kind of in the real live training. One of the big things as well is, I say it's not just over here, it's worldwide for firefighters. It's the silent killer, isn't it? It's the contamination of when we do live training. You know, one of the big pluses when we do virtual reality training is a sterile area, contamination free. So it's a big plus for us there. So it's that limiting firefighters' exposure to carcinogens and toxins within the training environment. If we could do 30% in the virtual world and 70% in the real world, you know, we'd reduce the risk by 30%. It'd be nice if it was more closer to 50%. But everything we're doing is trying to make firefighters, one, safer and more proficient, but also keeping their kind of health and well-being at the top of the agenda.
And that's a perfect segue into the comment that all things aren't complicated, all things aren't expensive. If firefighters would clean their gear, clean their vehicles, and shower within an hour, they'd be so much better off. But we still fight with them to do that, and it's not a hard thing, but it's as everybody has said through the day, it's sometimes it's overcoming what's always been and what's been there.
Yeah, it's overcut. Yeah, you're dead right. It's a bit of a tradition, and we've always done it this way. When I joined, we used to have yellow plastic slickers, cork helmets, you know, and we'd wearing breathing apparatus, and the incident commander will be behind us, and we'll be in BA, and it was, how's it going? You know, how times have changed now. It's all about kind of looking after kind of our firefighters. I know in the UK now, once you've been into a fire, your kit doesn't go back in the cab; it goes in the lockers. And if it's kind of really dirty, it gets changed. You don't wear it again. You know, they've got procedures now, and everything's logged. If you have a kind of a dirty wear, it's logged. So if something happens in the future, they can go back, look at your records. Yeah, he's been on that day. You know, they had this fire here. He's been exposed, and so everything's now logged for each individual.
I think this, among many other things, could be full conversations on their own. I'm going to keep this going for a couple more minutes, just because I want to let everyone talk. You know, Dave Coggeshell, I've kind of called your name too. You know, you want to do a quick little, who are you, really quick, and any kind of thoughts on your side. And then if anyone else, AJ, will come to you after Dave. And if anyone else wants to say anything, raise your hand, because I'm not going to volunteer anyone after that. And then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, hello everyone. I'm David Coggeshell, and I'm sort of an independent freelance consultant for over 40 years here in San Francisco, and I have been working with first responders since 2001. In fact, I had the honor to meet Kim Zagaris back in those days. In the early days, we formed the Golden Gate Safety Network when there was fear of after 9/11 of a terrorist attack to the Golden Gate Bridge, which caused a great opportunity for a lot of different agencies to come together and try to figure out a unified command sort of approach to that. So back in those days, my support to them was basically on paper in order to make pre-incident maps and posters for tabletops and so forth. Nobody was really using laptops that much yet, or there was no such thing as a smartphone. But over the years, I've continued to find projects, grant opportunities, and and got to meet a lot of first responders, and have been part of learning how to do GPS on the fire engines and learning how to document pre-site incident plan, pre-incident site plans, and so forth. So a couple of comments that I have is that it's great in terms of getting aware that the technology skills should be included in the recruiting process, and more serious training should be given to it. But that really starts, and procurement is really a problem on the hardware side. But fundamental to all this is back in the budgeting process, and usually I think it's a yearly budget that's set in advance, and very rarely see any sort of significant funds set aside for putting in place a capable tech innovation initiative. So I think that it has to be an issue that the board is aware of and willing to put some money behind, because you just can't do it by everybody changing their attitude, although that's a big part of it too. My particular focus is at this time for the last 7 or 8 years since Sandy Hook is on developing good indoor floor plans for pre-incident planning, and going all the way to, marking all the fire and life safety equipment, and tracking indoors, which is the sort of the leading edge of the frontier of GPS tracking. Is how do you do that indoors? And AJ here can tell you a lot about that. Ascent just won the big FRST challenge out at Muscatatuck with Indiana University. So that's an exciting thing. But my general observations over the years that pre-incident plans were gathered on paper, and it was very spotty between agencies, and it was very often hard to do because the site owners didn't have anything readily available, and that's always been a problem. But it's becoming easier and easier with new technology to generate those plans in a number of different ways. And but then there was no uniform way for the first responder side to take those plans in and be able to use them on an automated basis. So, but that is changing now. And AJ just spoke of TAC, Team Awareness Kit. That is a big free program from the government that reduces the whole procurement friction of doing something new. So we're experimenting with that, and I think there's a lot of innovation space in this area. So that's
Thanks, David. I'm gonna continue just for we're 17 minutes past, but we're keep rolling here. So I know AJ, you've had your hand up, so you want to add on to previous conversation with David said, and then again, if other people want to talk before we close out, feel free to raise your hand. So AJ.
Yeah, I've been met David, I don't know, a month ago, just helping him out and showing how one cool thing about TAC is I was able to just quickly and easily take the things that David has been working on for decades and just brought them right into TAC. And I had all of Indianapolis Fire Department's floor plan, just boom, it automatically geo-registered. It worked out perfect. But the reason I originally raised my hand because a comment that Jim, is it Keegan or Kiken? I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Had said he was mentioned about thermal imagers. And so he was like, look, yeah, it's got to work. And the thermal imager doesn't find the person, right? The firefighter has to use this thermal imager. That's a human that has to use this tool. And I push TAC a lot on the wildfire side. And I do get some pushback. It's like, well, we don't need technology. The reason these people die is because they ignore our rules of engagement and they need to train better. And I was like, no one is asking, hey, Siri, should I do this? And asking AI to make decisions for them. Should I go in this structure and fight it right now? But could it assist you when the human factors fail you? So when everything you've trained on, you've made that catastrophic decision, perhaps the technology might come in and save your ass and help for a better outcome. So when you are making that mayday, and everything else has failed you, those folks that are coming to help you might be better to assist you with technology. Will the technology help those people to coming to find you quicker, better? And so that's, I hear that a lot on the technology side. Will it make the fire go out faster? Will it, I don't know. But I know a thermal imager though does a lot better in a room when I'm searching it than without one. But I do have to know how to use it. The technology does have to be informative to me. So anyway, Jim, you sparked that with me, and I had to raise my hand and say that, because I won't say I fight that one a lot, but I have to defend that one a little bit with technology. Does it bring you situational awareness? I'm a big Gasaway fan, and I love that he's like, no, it doesn't. It is information that could be intelligence to help you make a better informed decision. You better know how to use it and when to use it. It doesn't replace or doesn't give you anything unless you know how to and when to use it. My rant is over.
It's just a tool to help us be more efficient, but it doesn't guarantee that we'll be more efficient.
And I'm putting Richard Gasaway's link in here. All right, so Georgie, I've actually never met you. I don't know who you are. I hope you're not a spam bot. If you want that, you got your hand raised. So if you want to say something really quick, floor is yours. Georgie, I think it's just that your name. All right, I'm gonna put your hand down. So, and then Mike Hermel, your camera's been on. I saw you. You want to just maybe quick, who are you? Connect, kind of what you're working on, just for 30 seconds, because I appreciate you being here.
Well, appreciate the invitation to come. I'm a CEO of a startup company. It's called Vortex. We're trying to get a better understanding of the firefighting side and backcountry wildfires. Been talking to a bunch of different agencies around the country. What's kind of interesting is just a week ago, I had a major fire where I live. Started about a mile from my house, and it burned about 2.5 square miles of land. They had 200 firefighters out here, so really appreciate what you guys all do. So what we're trying to really get a good understanding of, we're trying to focus on a high-tech side of things, and totally agree with what everybody's saying about how technology can be a good thing, but it can literally be a bad thing too if you're not using it correctly. So just basically, I'd like to connect with anybody that'd be willing to talk to me after this on ideas. We don't have a product to sell yet or anything like that. We're still very early on, but any kind of information that anybody can give us on fighting backcountry wildfires would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Well said, Mike. I'd like to connect with you after about this. And again, just for the sake of continued final thoughts, I want to throw it to David Danielson. You're here. I appreciate it. Just give a little thoughts and plug. And any thoughts on the conversation. Then we're going to do final comments here after that.
Oh, greetings. Thank you, Kevin. And it's great to see you again since Texas. So I just wanted to give a quick plug and introduction on myself. David Danielson, retired firefighter and lead remote pilot with Los Angeles Fire Department. I currently work with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, on development of robotics test methods. And I just want to make sure, there's a lot of University of YouTube knowledge out there when it comes to NIST, and people get a little confused by it, but you have advocates within the NIST group right now that are retired fire, retired law enforcement, that are helping truncate this information, especially to the leadership level, to understand that there's a partnership there. And certainly, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn for me to provide information about that. The other plug was for the International Association of Firefighters, IAFF Robotics Work Group. If you're not aware of what that is, we have representation here on this panel from FDNY and across the nation right now that's participating. Every other Wednesday right now, we are meeting on Zoom to discuss a lot of these topics when it comes specifically right now in the drone space. And then throughout, robotic use cases that IAFF can get behind. So I don't want to speak specifically to that other than give the invitation out for those that are interested. If you have an existing drone program or robotic systems program, please reach out and we'll get you on board to listen in and or participate with the work group. Thanks, Kevin.
Amazing. And Jeff, I know you gotta go, but Jeff, final thoughts from one of our lead speaker. Jeff, any mic drop from you?
Dang it, you put me on the spot. I don't have one. I want everybody to have a great weekend. Kevin, you're awesome. Loved all the input from everyone. And keep just pushing it. Keep out there. Just put it all out there and see what we can come up with. See y'all.
Right on. All right.
Well, guys, I'm sorry for the internet connection before that. I wanted to say that what you do, guys, is great. And I wanted to introduce myself. So we're developing a virtual reality simulator that allows firefighters to train. And we actually looking for experts for former firefighters probably to speak and see how training process is organized. So if there's any chance, so we can collaborate or we can discuss it. We're actually trying to understand the market and what solutions are there. So if there's anyone available, so please let me know.
Georgie, send me a note on LinkedIn. I haven't heard of the company or the technology. I'd be happy to share it out, but that's what this is about. And again, I appreciate this is the longest roundtable we've ever had, with about 65 people at one point, just absolutely wonderful. The reason all you hear is the reason why we do this. So I think we got about 10 more different roundtables and podcasts we can do from this roundtable alone.
Kevin,
yes, David.
Can I ask David Danielson a quick question before you close it out?
Sure. Keep it short though.
Yeah. You talked about NIST senior retired firefighters and so forth. Is that with the PCSR group in Boulder or the Gaithersburg group?
Primarily the robotics capabilities division is based out of Gaithersburg under the director of Adam Jacoff. However, we do have partnership with Colorado. So, both share their information, but the key point is we have, retired and active public safety members that are directly involved with that specific project.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, David. Thanks, David. Both David squared. And thank you, Gary Breeze, as well, for being here and helping spark this initial concept. And just all of you, this is not the first, this is not the last. We actually have another roundtable next Wednesday on the challenges of recruitment and retention. But I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We will send out a learning document. If you haven't connected with me, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I hope I have all your emails. But I'll be sending out a follow-up on LinkedIn with the document, the YouTube link, and all the learning findings from this and all the links. So really appreciate you all being here. I see some of you get your microphones off. So if you want anything final saying, let me know. Feel free, but really appreciate you all. Have a great weekend ahead, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye.
See ya.